It was a late spring evening when 8 friends, all in their late 20s, piled into a rental van, bound for an adventure down one of America's most iconic highways, Route 66. They had all met in college, and their friendship had grown over the years, solidified through shared interests in road trips, history, and seeking thrills. This trip was meant to be a fun escape, a break from work, from the pressures of adult life, and a chance to relive the carefree days of their youth. But what they didn't realize was that their journey down Route 66 would become a terrifying tale of a night they would never forget. Their names were Jake, Ben, Sanjay, Emily, Sarah, Kevin, Maria, and David. Jake, the most experienced driver, took the wheel for the start of the trip, navigating the urban chaos of Chicago before hitting the wide-open road. It was a full day's drive to Los Angeles, with stops along the way to see the famous attractions, diners, and hidden gems of the historic route. They toured, laughed, and spent the night in the City of Angels. It wasn't until the following evening that they began their journey back, and that's when the terror began. The group had spent the entire day in LA, exploring the city's landmarks, enjoying the nightlife, and indulging in the energy of the West Coast. By the time they decided to leave, it was already dark. Jake, who had been behind the wheel the entire day, felt the weight of exhaustion settle in as they crossed into the outskirts of the city. The endless stretch of highway loomed ahead, and the only thing visible in the headlights was the empty road and the occasional flicker of neon signs from nearby truck stops. They were about an hour into their journey when Jake pulled over on the side of the road, rubbing his eyes. "I can't do it anymore, guys. I'm too tired," Jake admitted, his voice hoarse from the long drive. "Dude, you've been driving all day. Let's take a break," Ben said, slapping Jake on the back as he sat up in the passenger seat. Ben had some experience with driving, but he'd never tackled a highway this isolated at night. Still, he insisted he could manage. Jake reluctantly agreed, and Ben moved into the driver's seat while Jake leaned back, closing his eyes for a few minutes. It was already 11:30 p.m., and the air outside had begun to cool rapidly. The car was filled with the sound of quiet conversations and the hum of the engine. The other friends, having had their fill of excitement for the day, began to doze off in the back seats. The first few miles passed uneventfully. Ben drove cautiously, aware of the responsibility on his shoulders. But then, just as the dark road stretched on ahead, a strange feeling washed over him, a sense of unease that he couldn't explain. The emptiness of the highway felt suffocating. Ben tried to brush off the feeling, thinking it was just his imagination. But the deeper they went into the night, the more unsettling things became. It wasn't long before Ben began to feel nauseous. The air in the van seemed to grow thick, and his stomach churned as though it was being twisted in knots. He swallowed hard, hoping it was just exhaustion taking its toll. But as the minutes passed, the feeling intensified. He pulled over once more, a little shaken. When he got out of the van to catch his breath, a cold wind swept across the highway, biting at his skin. There was something wrong. "Ben, you okay?" Maria called out from the back seat, her voice groggy with sleep. "I'm fine," he replied, though his voice sounded strained. He stepped away from the van, hoping the fresh air would clear his head. But when he looked back at the vehicle, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The stillness of the night was almost unnatural. Ben quickly returned to the van, telling himself he was just overtired. As he got back behind the wheel, he noticed Jake had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, his head tilted to the side. The others were still dozing in the back, unaware of the strange energy that seemed to surround them. But Ben, feeling the weight of something unseen, couldn't shake the sense of being followed. They continued their drive, the headlights cutting through the darkness. An hour passed, and the highway was still eerily empty. That's when the strange incident occurred. Out of nowhere, a motorcycle appeared in front of them, speeding along the road at an alarming rate. Ben's heart stopped as the rider slammed on the brakes, sending the bike skidding dangerously close to the van. Ben slammed his foot on the brake pedal, veering to the side in an attempt to avoid the collision. The van swerved, and for a moment, it felt as though the world had slowed down. The motorcycle's front wheel came inches from hitting the side of the van, and then, just as quickly, the rider pulled away, disappearing into the night. The entire van was filled with the sound of startled gasps and exclamations. "Did you see that?" Sarah cried, her voice panicked. "Yeah, I saw it. That biker nearly hit us," Kevin shouted from the back. Ben, his hands shaking, looked in the rearview mirror. But there was nothing, no sign of the motorcycle, no trace of the rider. The road behind them was empty. "Where did it go?" Maria demanded, eyes wide with confusion. Ben's stomach turned. He felt an unsettling sense of dread settle over him as he drove on, the silence in the van pressing in on them. No one spoke for a while, their minds racing with the thought of what they'd just witnessed. It wasn't just a near miss, it was like the bike had vanished into thin air. After what felt like an eternity, Ben spoke, trying to shake off the tension. "Maybe it was just an illusion, guys. I don't know what to think, but it's gone now." The group nodded uncertainly, but the strange incident had shaken them to their core. No one spoke of it for the next several miles, but the eerie feeling lingered. Around 1 o'clock, as they neared a particularly desolate stretch of highway, another strange occurrence unfolded. Sanjay, who had been unusually quiet in the back seat, suddenly sat up straight, his eyes wide with fear. He was staring out the window, his gaze fixed on something ahead. "Guys," Sanjay said, his voice trembling. "There's something out there." Everyone turned to look out the window, but there was nothing. Just the highway stretching endlessly into the dark night. "No, seriously, there's something following us. I saw it again," Sanjay said, his voice growing frantic. "It's been with us since the rest stopped. I saw it standing near the trees, and now it's following us. I can feel it." The others exchanged confused glances. They thought Sanjay was just exhausted, his mind playing tricks on him. But as the van continued down the highway, the tension in the air was palpable. Everyone was on edge now. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, the van was struck with a barrage of rocks. Small stones rained down from above, hitting the windows with a sharp, echoing crack. The sound was deafening, like the van was being pelted by an invisible force. Ben slammed on the brakes, jerking the van to a stop. The group screamed in panic, their hearts racing. "What the hell?" Emily shouted, looking out the window in terror. "Where did those come from?" Ben, his hands shaking, looked outside. There was nothing. No one. Just the empty highway stretching out ahead. He quickly put the van in drive and floored the gas pedal, speeding off down the highway. The rest of the ride was a blur of tension and confusion. No one spoke of what had just happened, but the presence of something sinister was undeniable. As the hours passed, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Each of them had a sense of dread, but none of them could explain why. When they finally arrived in Chicago, everyone was exhausted. The events of the night hung over them like a dark cloud, and none of them could shake the feeling that something was still following them. As they got out of the van and said their goodbyes, Sanjay pulled Ben aside. "I don't know what happened, but I swear that thing was real. It followed us all the way back." Ben nodded, his face pale. "I don't know what to think either, but I'll never forget what happened. It was like something was after us, and it wasn't human." And with that, the group went their separate ways, but the haunting of Route 66 would stay with them forever. Some of them never spoke of it again, while others would occasionally mention it, still unsure of what they had truly encountered that night. The mystery of the motorcycle rider, the phantom presence, and the unexplainable events remained unsolved, and Route 66 became a place they would never forget, the highway where they learned that some things are better left unexplored.